Welcome to another episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, the podcast where we delve into the mystery of Scooby-Doo media, getting clues from people who helped bring our favorite mystery-solving dog to life on various platforms, and maybe eating some Scooby snacks along the way. I'm your host, Alexa Lawler.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been to those meddling kids.
Gang, we've just been handed our next mystery.
Blasted meddling kids.
So, it has been quite a while, hasn't it? I'm so sorry. It has been so long since I have been able to put out another episode of this podcast. And I've been sitting on this interview for a little while. I'm so excited to have finally had a chance to edit it and put it together. For the 29th episode and the return of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, I had the chance to chat with writing duo extraordinaire Justin Becker and Steve Clemmons. Justin and Steve wrote Be Quiet Scooby-Doo together from Be Cool Scooby-Doo. And Steve also worked on If You Can't Scooby-Doo the Time, Don't Scooby-Doo the Crime, and Be Cold Scooby-Doo. This interview did take place in early 2021, so it's possible that a few things might be outdated now, particularly any references to what was going on that particular day that we did the interview. But overall, I'm just really excited for you guys to finally hear it. But I'm sure after such a long hiatus, you're ready for me to stop talking so we can get into the interview. Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problem. Yeah, thanks for having us. This is exciting.
So I think since this is the first time I'm having two people on the podcast, if you could just briefly introduce yourselves. Justin, if you maybe want to start.
Yeah, sure. My name is Justin Becker. This is my voice. When you're hearing this voice, it's me who's talking.
And this is Steve Clemmons. This is my voice. I sound maybe a little less put together than Justin, but this is my voice. And a little brief background on us is we're writing partners, and we've written together a ton.
Yep. And we grew up together outside of Chicago, so we've been doing it together for a long time.
Yeah, we won't say how long, but it's been since high school. So it's more than one decade, I'll tell you that much.
So I always start off with 3 questions of Scooby-Doo related trivia, if you're up for it.
Yeah, sure.
Hit us.
We are definitely gonna miss all 3, just to let you know.
I guess this one's kind of given away by the screen beside you here, but in the episode Be Quiet Scooby-Doo, what is the name of the crystal formations?
Well, thank you so much for having the screenshot that has the name of it right now, because that is very helpful. I believe, if I read correctly, it's called the Crystal Canopy.
What a layup.
That is correct.
Wait, did Justin get that point and I didn't? Is this a competition?
No, yeah, is one of us going to win?
You can work on a team. It's fine.
All right.
So also in Be Quiet Scooby-Doo, which member of the gang becomes so enthralled with the crystals that they begin to understand the motive of the crystal crawler and act like the monster for a little bit?
I know this one. It's Velma.
It's got to be Velma, yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, 2 for 2.
And the last question for the trivia. In the episode Be Cold Scooby-Doo, which member of the gang is seeing snow for the very first time?
I know this one too.
I had nothing to do with this one. This was Steve on his own, so I have no idea. Yeah.
This one's more for Steve, but
And it's a deep cut because it's story by. I didn't write the script. I just wrote the story. Um, this, I believe it's Shaggy.
Yes, it is Shaggy.
Yes. Okay. Sweet. I wasn't sure what they had changed. I've never seen the episode. I've seen the other two, Be Quiet and if you can't Scooby-Doo the time, don't Scooby-Doo the time. The crime. I always mess it up.
Yes, definitely.
A little backstory, I guess, for your listeners. Steve and I usually write together. The timeline during Be Cool was such that Marley, Halpern Grazer, and I had sold a show to Disney, and we were waiting for all of the Warner Brothers and Disney legal wrangling to get through, and so we started writing on Be Cool, and then all of a sudden our show got greenlit, and so I had to pull off of that, and so Steve then continued on his own. So Steve wrote more, obviously, then on his own, but I only was directly involved with one episode. I think I wrote 2 or 3 more outlines that I don't think ended up getting approved for one reason or another. But yeah, I only have anything to do with Be Quiet Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, and then I got hired on that other show, so I believe that's why I didn't write Be Cold. I'm not sure.
Yeah. How many episodes did you do on your own, Steve?
I on my own, I wrote one episode, story and teleplay, and I wrote a story by the other one, and then I think at that point, the other show offered me full-time employment.
So to start off, what's your relationship to Scooby-Doo? Did you grow up watching? We'll maybe start with Steve on this one.
I wouldn't say I grew up in any sense of I followed it religiously or anything, but I did watch a version of Scooby-Doo when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I watched a pup named Scooby-Doo, which was one where all of them were young kids and Scooby was a puppy, or they were younger and Scooby was a puppy, and he basically looked like Scrappy, but it was Scooby. And the other distinction of that one is the monsters, I believe, were real, which I remember as a kid. I knew enough about Scooby, I don't know if this is my first memory, so I don't know if I actually had seen Scooby, but I knew enough about it that I thought it was awesome that the monsters were real, and I was like, they're not real in this one. This is a game, or sorry, they're real in this one. They're not fake. This is a game changer, because they had real monsters, and it was fun. But I don't know if it's good. I haven't gone back and rewatched it. And then I saw some Scooby, reruns on Cartoon Network in high school, and their wacky team ups and stuff. And then I didn't really watch any more until this.
Justin, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely watched it as a kid in the same way that all children seem, or at least of our time, just passively turned on the TV and watched whatever cartoons were on. And if it came on, then I was happy. It's funny, in preparation for this, I was trying to think, I'm like, oh, what are some of my memories of Scooby-Doo? And I suddenly remembered, Steve, I think that we, in a group, at one of our high school dances, a Halloween dance, we went as the Scooby Gang. It must have been sophomore or junior year. Steve was Fred, as you can probably imagine. I had hair then and brown hair, and I can grow a beard, so I was Shaggy. Our redheaded friend was Daphne, and our friend who had brown hair and glasses was Velma. And then our other friend, who I think was his idea to do this, he's like, I'm going to make a great Scooby costume. And I think he just put on a brown shirt and maybe made a card, out of colored paper, made a collar.
That blows my mind that even having written multiple episodes of Scooby and brainstormed for the show, that I had never remembered that until you just brought it up. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember, because I didn't want to. And you guys were like, come on.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It only occurred to me this morning as well. And I think also thinking back, I think we won best group costume. Like it's, yeah, it's very funny that
God, memory is messed up, man.
yeah.
Whole things can just be completely looked over for so long. And then, anyway, sorry.
It came up. I was just like, I'm like, Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo. I'm like, and then I suddenly got a flash of someone wearing, like taped on construction paper ears, and I was like, who was that? And then I all of a sudden came back in like a flash, and I was like, oh my, I'm remembering repressed trauma.
That would be great to see, actually. Because just looking at the both of you, I was like, okay, Steve was probably Fred.
Yep.
And you're like, what was
Makes sense.
Justin?
You can't. I'm sitting down. You can't quite tell, but I definitely have the shaggy body type. I'm lanky.
Yeah.
I am slightly stooped. My legs are longer than the rest of my body. Yeah, it all adds up.
You have a lot of medical issues that aid in your in looking like Shaggy.
That's right. Yeah, it's all symptoms of deformations.
My hunched back, my weird legs. I look like a cartoon version of a hippie. And your hair really did look like him back then.
Yeah, it did. That was the most accurate part.
That's awesome. And what was the story of how the both of you came to work in animation?
Well, I'm going to assume that anyone listening to your podcast has probably listened to some of the other ones. This would be a strange place to start fresh. Marley really described it very well. Marley's episode, generally, I would recommend. Marley comes off very, very well in it. But yeah.
You actually stop this episode and go listen to Marley's?
That would basically be my advice to anyone. But yes, so Marley and I and Steve were in a comedy troupe in college that was big on YouTube by virtue of being early adopters. Truly had nothing to do with quality or anything. But yeah, for like a minute there, we were like, up there in the top 10 comedian channels, and we were neck and neck with Derek Comedy, if you're familiar with them. Donald Glover came out of there. Still remains to be seen who will have the larger career ultimately. He seems like he's doing pretty well and sort of winning at the moment. But, here I am on a Scooby-Doo podcast. So comeback starts now. But yeah, so we were in this comedy troupe, and we got hired by Warner Brothers, who was doing kind of they called it a creative lab, and it was sort of like midway between an internship and a job. And they brought us out here to LA to basically, they knew that viral videos existed. They knew that people watched them, and they really didn't know beyond that. And they assembled us to kind of tell them what to do with that. And we did not have that answer. So that only lasted all of a year. But Marley was the only one of us who had any foresight whatsoever. He quickly saw the writing was on the wall, and he went to where the people with the real jobs were, which was the animation department. And he started talking to them, and he gave them his samples. And so Marley was able to parlay that into a kind of an entry-level job. Meanwhile, then when the program ended for me, Steve moved out to LA. He and I resumed kind of our college and high school writing partnership, and we were starting to do live action stuff. We had a bunch of different projects. We did some stuff for Adult Swim. We did some other stuff. And in that time, Marley kind of became entrenched enough at Warner Brothers that he was, when he was on the show Mad, and they were looking for writers, he was able to submit my stuff, and I eventually got in that way. So then I was on Mad, and then Marley and I sold Right Now Kapow. And while that was, while Disney and Warner Brothers were working out all of the legal framework for how that partnership would work, they're like, well, have you guys do on some other Warner Brothers shows? And at that point, I'm like, I'm going to bring in Steve as well. And so kind of in that interim before Right Now Kapow started, we wrote on New Looney Tunes, and we wrote on, obviously Scooby-Doo. Then Right Now Kapow happened after that point, Steve stayed at Warner Brothers for a little while, and he did Bunnicula, and he did Unikitty, and he did Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs was his biggest one. I'm talking for you, Steve. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to pretend you're not even here.
Yeah, that's fine. I was the story editor on Yabba Dabba Dinosaurs. Don't forget that.
And he was head writer of Yabba Dabba, and so he gave me a couple script assignments, which was fun, and nice payback after Right Now Kapow when I got to boss him around. So he got to boss me around
in a good way too. Let me talk a little bit.
You're right. All right.
It's all payback because Justin did me a solid. When Right Now Kapow was in development, Warner Brothers was like, hey, we'll toss you a few freelance episodes, different shows. And Justin was like, hey, would it be okay if I took half that money and gave it to this other guy so he can have some experience? And because he did that, he was able to hire me on Right Now Kapow later on and boss me around. So he earned it a little bit.
Yeah, you got to understand about me. One thing about me is that I hate having 100% of the money. I really only want 50% of the money. So anytime I'm able to just split it and give it away, I'm just happy as a clam,
Yeah, you hate money.
Yeah.
You like 50% money at all times.
That's right. You give me $10, I'm going to say, no, just $5.
Just $5 is fine. And was working in animation something that you both had pictured yourself doing, or did you just kind of fall into it?
Steve, I talked a lot. You want to take this one? And answer for both of us. Please get in my mindset and tell me what I felt.
I don't think when I went to school, I didn't imagine it, but I watched so much animation that it was kind of like, to some extent, a dream. I remember imagining, I went to film school, so I remember seeing the path unfold before me, and I can't draw, as being like, all right, well, I could, write, become good at writing, and then maybe someday sell a show, and then maybe if I become successful, maybe I could sell like an animated show and do like, my dream would be like action comedy or something, just because animation allows you to do such crazy fun action stuff. Because I think at the time during college I was watching a lot of like anime, but my favorite was Avatar: The Last Airbender, which dates me pretty well. I think it's a 3-year series, so you can kind of tell how old I am. But I was watching a lot of Avatar: Last Airbender, and it in my opinion merged like comedy and action in this really fun way. And I lean a little bit more towards comedy, but I still loved that show. And there was part of me that was just like, that would be like the dream, but I still saw no pathway to that, because I was in film school, and I was like, oh, live action is what I'm studying and what I'm gonna do. And then sure enough, sketch comedy led to animated sketch comedy via Justin, and then that led to animation. And then I found myself, but I had spent 10 years being like, oh no, I guess I'll do live action. So I found myself in animation for a couple of years before I remembered, oh yeah, this is kind of like what I wanted to do. Not necessarily kids animation. In my head, I was like, Adult Swim is like the pinnacle. Like I want to do, sort of basically no notes animation where no one's giving me any notes and I'm just having fun. I don't want to speak for Justin in that regard, because I don't necessarily think he had that journey, but I have always appreciated animation, never really saw myself realistically working in it. And then I found myself working in it, and it took me a couple years to remember, oh yeah, this is awesome. I really like this. I really like being able to like write for animation, simply because you don't have to worry as much about budget and what's producible, and you can pack it in with tons of stuff that you couldn't do in live action easily, or it would break your budget.
Steve and I actually both independently of one another at school, besides studying film, we also studied playwriting a lot. And that was originally my dream, was to get into playwriting. And that's actually something that we bonded over with John when we met with him, John Coldenberry. John definitely cited a lot of similar influences when he was describing like what he wanted the show to be. Like he talked about Fred being kind of similar in some ways to Basil Fawlty from Fawlty Towers, and then he talked about kind of he wanted to do the rapid fire of like a Noel Coward kind of thing, or a Neil Simon, maybe he said. And so we definitely were like, oh, cool. And during that time, Steve and I, for whatever reason, we had just written a pilot for a live action pilot for this production company with a deal at ABC, I think. And it was basically a farce. And like, so he had gotten so into, studying farces, like Fawlty Towers. So when John kind of said that stuff, we're like, oh, wow. And our like eyes lit up. We're like, yeah, we can absolutely do that. And then, so John kind of steered us in that way for our script, which in retrospect was the exact opposite of what Warner Brothers executives wanted. It's something that was just extremely talky, very verbal. That was not at all what they wanted. So it's kind of like imagine a GPS that's telling you to go straight into a wall. That's kind of like, with the best of intentions, that's sort of what it was like a little bit.
Also, so much of farce is like the physicality of the actors, like running around a set location, and then to try and like recreate that in animation is basically impossible. In the way we were coming from it with theatrical farce, I've never seen it done. You can do it in film, like you can do it like Birdcage and a couple others, but like it's almost impossible in animation. And we were like trying to do that, and then that's got us into some trouble.
I mean, I think it's definitely possible. It's just not necessarily taking advantage of what animation can offer. Like it's kind of grafting this other thing onto it. I had written on Mad, and we had done a couple scripts for new Looney Tunes, but we hadn't seen how they turned out. And this was Steve's like first animation job, and I think that now I think we would have approached this story a lot differently, and maybe not have done it at all, because I think in retrospect, I think that the novelty of them not talking and we're only hearing in their mind doesn't work as well in animation as it would necessarily in like live action. Like in live action, generally, I feel like a commitment to a high concept conceit in an episode of like, no one's going to say anything this whole episode, you appreciate that more. Like in Community, the TV show Community, they did a lot of things like that, which is a whole conceit that they stretch out for an entire episode and commit to. In this, like sometimes when I was watching it just now, I'm like, oh, it kind of looks like we just forgot to do lip sync. Like you don't really feel, it doesn't feel like as much of a trick. It just kind of feels like a strange little choice. And so I don't think that it paid as much dividends as we were hoping it would to do this. And I think also it just created a lot of issues. Like, now if I were ever to do anything like this, I would, the fact that we were freelance writers who meant that once we turned in the script, which was so execution dependent, the fact that we would have no more communication with John or with the storyboarders left so much up to them that in our minds, like, well, it has to be this way. This is the only one way that it will work. Like that was kind of setting ourselves up for failure in a lot of ways. And John rewrote it with Marley, and they simplified it a great deal, and to its benefit for sure. I think our first draft, I read it over again last night, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of great jokes in here. My God, that was complex. Wow. I would not have done anything nearly like this if I was presented this opportunity again right now.
Yeah, and I think that's evident in our second draft, which was 35% shorter and much closer to the end product, with some lines being different here and there, and some character motivations. But yeah, execution wise, it was it's always hard when you don't have a ton of experience writing animation. How much do I need to put in here? And it's still hard even to this day, because it's like, depending on your director, some directors are going to be like, read it and be like, oh, there's not enough telling me what to do. And then other directors are going to read it and be like, there's too much telling me what to do. I'm throwing half this out and just doing it the way I want to do it. But you can't operate under the assumption that that's going to happen. So you have to operate under the assumption that you need to explain everything to them, or a lot of stuff to them, so that they understand what they're reading, and then know that they might just throw most of it out. So it's definitely...
Yeah, which is great, because like, having both of us having run our own rooms or shows, essentially realizing that like, all right, whatever you write needs to be translated by a boarder, and then later animators. And so, it's a very different skill set than when we originally had, which was coming from film and coming from sketch comedy, where when we would write something, we were intending to make it ourselves. So we had to have an idea of how we would do it. In animation, it's good to obviously to have an idea of how you envision it could work. Like, you don't want to write something that you're like, it's kind of fuzzy, someone else will figure it out. You want to be able to have the answer. Someone asks you like, how did you imagine that we would set this scene up? Oh, I imagined it this way. But you don't want it to be, that's the only way it'll work. You want it to be like that it could interpreted a variety of ways, because, especially if you're just a freelance writer, we'd have no interaction with the storyboarders, but even when on Right Now Kapow, where we're a lot more hands-on, with the directors and with the boarders, it was just you still like, you don't want to be that person over someone's shoulder being like, do it this way. Like, you want to empower someone to do it, the way they want to do it, and make the best choices, that most creative choices they can. So the idea of being that, like, that it would get more interesting and better at every subsequent step, from writing through boarding through animation.
Yeah, Justin mentioned earlier that we were only freelance writers, and we wrote the second draft of this script in 2 days. And which calls to mind, a specific memory when we were talking about this leading into this interview. I was like, oh yeah, the reason we did that was because I was actually, because we were only freelance, I was working another job and had to call in sick. And it was a quick turnaround. It was like, hey, we need you to do a rewrite. Oh, okay, no problem. Usually that's a week or two. And they're like, we need it by Friday afternoon. And we were like, what? We just turned it in like a couple days ago. And after initially getting past they can't do this to us, I have a job, like a 9 to 5. We eventually were like, all right. Justin was like, you call in sick. I'll shift things around, and we'll just spend 2.5 days drinking tons of coffee, and 2 days drinking, really a day and a half, because we had to turn it in. A day and a half drinking tons of coffee and writing this thing. So we wrote a bunch, and then would switch back and forth, and then be like, yep, this is good. Oh, I've changed this, and then move on to the next thing. And it was this coffee fueled bender of just like rewriting that I still look back fondly. I'm like, I can't believe we did that. It was basically a page 1 rewrite in 2 days, which I was all out of pure necessity.
Which we've since gone on to do a bunch of times, things like that. Like, at the time, I'm like, well, this is anomalous. This will never happen again. But now on a bunch of different projects, they're like, all right, great. Give us the first draft in 2 days. And we're like, okay, we can do that. But all right.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's definitely when having 2 writers really pays.
For sure. And to take a step back here, what is the story of how you got pulled in to work on Be Cool Scooby-Doo?
Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think I touched on that a little bit. It was kind of in the interim when we had sold Right Now Kapow to Disney, but they had still just, I think, like, all told, the legal wrangling between these 2 behemoth corporations, as you might imagine, was not an easy thing. I think it probably took at least a year for them to figure it out. And in the interim, Warner Brothers was like, Justin, we don't want you to go elsewhere, get a job somewhere else. So we're going to have you kind of bounce around on a couple of different WB shows. And I, at that time, was like, sounds great. Boy, this would be a lot more fun if Steve was here as well. Because, Steve and I had been doing a lot of writing together at that point. And it was like, we really kind of got it into as smooth a machine as we were able to get going there. And so I was like, yeah, let's bring him in. That way we can make this the best experience and write the best scripts we could. And yeah, so we had done a couple different things. Like New Looney Tunes was the one that we had written scripts for. I think we had done some development on other WB things. Like for a little while there, they were going to relaunch. They were going to relaunch the Banana Splits, and so like we did a bunch of development work on that. And I think like a couple other things. Like we were just kind of for a little bit there. We were with Marley going around. We were just kind of their go-to people for odd jobs. And eventually then, Be Cool Scooby-Doo started, and we met with John and got on really well with him.
Yeah, we met with John initially, and John sort of pitched his take on the show, and that's when he brought up the farce and sort of his touchstones for each character, and we were like, all right, yeah, this could be like a really cool show. Because initially we were like, I don't know, Scooby-Doo, it can be good, can be bad too. There's been all different versions of it. But then when we met with John, we were like, we got pretty excited about it. And then John brought us in and a couple other writers, including Marley and Josie Campbell, and brought us in for like a 1-day writer's workshop, unpaid, had to call sick day on that too, to come in during the day and break a few different stories, and sort of work as a group as writers to like come up with some ideas, and that's where we turned silent episode slugline into like a 4-sentence slug line of like, it could be this. And that was a fun day. And we came up with a couple different things. And that's how we got Be Quiet Scooby-Doo. And then we came in and did that again to break our other outlines like Be Cold, and Justin had a couple that ended up, we don't want to go that direction, and they got like, set aside. And but we did that twice, was have these sort of writers' days where we'd come in and workshop.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we only got to do a few times when we got to do in person with John and with Marley and Josie, and it was so fun. Like, especially with this show, I wish that we had been able to have a proper writer's room. I really think it would have benefited tremendously, especially because like John's approach to the show was so character based, right? And he had such a specific, idea of these characters that we only basically got to expose to that through talking to him and through reading a couple of the scripts. But like, if we'd actually been able to talk to him every day and work on the things, we definitely would have been able to hit those characters a lot, like, better on our first draft and everything. And I think the whole show would have improved. But yeah, unfortunately, they could only have Marley on staff full time, and the rest had to be floating freelance writers.
I'll get on a soapbox real quick and just say that I think all animated shows, or any shows in general, would be better with a writer's room. Justin, you ran a show with a writer's room, and I was on it, and I ran a show without a writer's room, and I'll tell you, it's better to have a writer's room. It's better to have a team of writers who know the voice of the show, so it's not just one or two people trying to like rewrite every script to get it on, to get it the right tone, like especially with Be Cool Scooby-Doo, like Justin touched on, where all the characters have such a very specific way of speaking, and John knows it so well. If he had a couple writers in there, they could quickly adapt and learn that language within an episode or two of being fully immersed, and then everyone's lives would be a lot easier. But that's not the way it tends to work a lot of times, unfortunately, in animation for budgetary reasons. That's my soapbox moment.
Yeah, for the rewriting, a lot of the rewriting fell to Marley and to John, and like it was a lot. Like I remember them at the time being very stressed out. Like I remember John specifically he was smoking a vape pen like all the time, tobacco, and would have two of them charging like on his computer at any given moment. And at the time, I was like, that seems like a lot. This dude seems like he's really burning the candle at both ends. Then later, when I ran my own show, I was like, oh, I get it now. I am dying. That makes sense that he was like that. Because I didn't have to rewrite everyone's thing in the same way that John and Marley did.
Oh man. And Justin, did you happen to remember what some of those ideas that maybe didn't make the cut were?
Yeah, I was just looking at them just before we started. One was based off of like riffing on an old Scooby-Doo. Here, talk to Steve. Let me pull those up and I can look at them.
Sure.
My memory, I have the memory of essentially a goldfish who played football without a helmet. So I really need to look this up.
Oh, sorry. I thought that's what you were saying the episode was about. I was like, what? That sounds terrible. But no. I see.
Yeah, that's no, it does sound terrible, and that's my reality, unfortunately. Yeah.
A goldfish with CTE. I get it. Yeah. You're a goldfish with head trauma. I see.
That's right. You get it.
Yeah. Well, I guess in the meantime, I could talk about Be Cold Scooby-Doo because I only did the story and it's short. In that, I think we pitched. That was another sort of something that came up in the room, and it was just like, I think the slug line for that was just because there were like lists of Scooby episodes and then things listed underneath it, and one of them just said snow. And I was like, what's that? And John was like, I want an episode that takes place in the snow. And so I don't think it was just me, but we as a group of 5 came up with a rough, like, well, what if they went skiing, and we got through the ski resort idea. Like we got probably 15-20 minutes into talking about things that could happen in it, and like we would rarely talk about the mystery, or if we did, it would probably change enough that it was mostly just like, could we do an episode about this? And we got about a little chunk of the way through, and then I threw out, I was like, or it could be like a parody of The Thing instead. That's another way to go with snow. And John was like, oh my God, I love that. Like I guess he loved The Thing, the movie. And he was like, we have to do that. But we had come up with so much stuff, and we had otherwise a pretty much working plan for how to do the episode at a ski resort, that it was suddenly like, let's put scientists on the ski resort mountain. And we were trying to like find a way to connect those two otherwise completely separate. Like they each could have been their own episode easily. And so that one, again, I've never seen it, only wrote the story. I don't know how much changed in the script writing process, but if there are scientists, that's because originally it was an idea of, what if we did a Thing episode? What if we did a ski resort episode? What if they exist in the same episode? And so I wrote up an outline for that one, and it incorporates some scientists, it incorporates some pro skiers and the owner of the resort, and everybody has a motivation. It's flimsy to Better for wanting to pretend to be Frostbite the Snowman. Don't know if that's the name that stayed. And that's sort of that. That's how that one came to be, was, through the room process and tossing out an idea too far into it. What if we did things completely differently? And then it just, became its. In some ways, I was like worried. I was worried at the time that, oh no, we're going to derail things. But I think in general with Scooby-Doo, like, you got to have different types of suspects, right? Like sometimes mashing two things together works well, because like in the Be Quiet Scooby-Doo, tour guide and scientist have nothing to do with each other. Like they're just as far as professions and stuff. So to see them like, oh, okay, they're both suspects in this who's going to be the monster mystery.
definitely.
And I figured out my episodes. So one was based off of the old episode, A Night of Fright is No Delight.
Okay.
Someone dies, and I can't remember why. He leaves a bunch of money to Scooby, and so the gang goes and watches like a video will to figure it all out. And I think that one might have been A Night of Fright is No Delight. I think might have been that classic Scooby in which they have to like stay overnight in order to inherit the money, which is now such a common trope that it's a joke. I think that originated in that episode, and so it was kind of revisiting that. I can't remember if it also involved like more people getting bumped off, kind of Agatha Christie style or not. But that didn't. I can't remember why that didn't go forward. And then the other one was an original one in which they go to kind of like there's this fictional mystery writer named Eloise Spooky, and so they go to who wrote all of her mysteries set in this fictional or set in her real town called like Grebbit's Grove, and every summer Grebbit's Grove would have Spooky days, and I think the conceit was that like maybe Daphne or someone or Velma were like huge fans of this mystery writer, and so they wanted to go and to experience Spooky days firsthand. And the masked maniac, who was like a common antagonist in the Spooky books, like starts showing up, and then crimes or something start happening that are just like the books, and they have to figure out who's behind it.
Awesome.
And I don't remember why that one was killed, but if our track record with Be Quiet Scooby-Doo was any indication, it was probably because it was way too wordy and literary.
Well, I could have sworn they did something on the Night of Fright is No Delight one.
They probably did, yeah. I mean, I wonder. Yeah, I have no idea what that one ended up being, but I'm sure that was such a classic Scooby that I'm sure that they revisited at some point, because that was in our second go around when they had kind of decided that they wanted to do more based off the original series, partially as homage, but partially because the executives were more likely to greenlight it because it was based off of a story they were familiar with.
Yeah. But even in Be Cool, I've just got it up on my phone here. The where there's a will, there's a wraith is basically the same premise.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, that must have been what they ended up doing. Where the will, that's a better name than mine. My name that I suggested is admittedly terrible. I was trying to do as many rhymes as A Night of Fright is No Delight. So mine was called, oh God, this is embarrassing. It's called The Nocturne on This Rock Berm Has a Shock Turn.
Boo.
Sure, but I feel like an average viewer might have to look up what a nocturne and a berm is to get the title, and that's that's probably
spend half a day with the thesaurus.
I can absolutely imagine the WB execs looking at that and getting as far as the word berm and being going, nope, not interested. Next one.
Yeah, fair enough.
I will say I'm very proud of the fact that I believe there was an early conceit that John had said he would love it if every episode had Scooby-Doo in the title, like Be Cool Scooby-Doo. And Justin and I's episodes are the only ones to do that, I believe, with Be Quiet Scooby-Doo, Be Cold Scooby-Doo, and if you can't Scooby-Doo the time, don't Scooby-Doo the crime. Which, again, there was like 50-some episodes, so no one cares or thinks about. But at one point, that was the plan for all of them, and we did it. So I'm glad your episode got killed, and there was no episode with Berm in the title.
Yeah, it's all for the best. Look, there's some sort of alternate reality out there right now in which this episode exists, and kids all over the world are talking about berms, BERM, and they just can't get enough of berm related content. and I started a berm craze.
It's not too late.
Definitely.
I think for the listener, a berm is just a hill. But it rhymed. It fit the rhyme scheme. I bent over backwards to try to fit that rhyme scheme, and it was deeply unnecessary. I just looked up berm, and this is a great example of why English is incredibly difficult for non-native speakers, because a berm could mean a mound of snow or dirt as formed when clearing land, or it could also be any strip of level ground on a summit or a nearly flat portion of beach. So it could either be a hill or a completely flat area.
Perfect.
I get it, non-English speakers. It's not easy. My heart goes out to you.
So if you clear snow, you've created a berm next to a berm, and they're literally opposites.
That's right.
Great.
And being able to work on Be Cool Scooby-Doo, which is, probably the most like comedic focused Scooby-Doo show. What was it like to work on a comedic take with these iconic characters?
I think the show was originally created to be funny, so I think there's a lot of it that was just like, this is great. This feels really great, especially in the first act of Be Quiet Scooby-Doo, where the characters are all talking off each other and they're kind of stuck in a van. And they all have very specific POV dialogue. They have very specific perspectives in the way they say every line. So A, it's kind of easy to get into their voice, and B, it's also easy to write jokes for them, and then C, they're kind of like so different that they can bounce off each other in really fun ways. So there's part of me that's like, I remember at the time the hardest part of writing a Scooby-Doo episode is writing mystery, and it's the part we spent the most time on and cared the most about. But when we were just writing the jokes, it was like, this is great. This is honestly fun to do, and there weren't a lot of things that we got a chance to write prior to this, where you'd have 5 people just being able to talk and instantly know who they are, what their sort of motivations are, why Shaggy is both scared and hungry. But everyone knows that with Scooby-Doo. So to be able to like just work off that shorthand that people already know was just like a really fun opportunity to write jokes for and stuff. And like we've mentioned before, we've overwrote this script so much that they were just, because it was just so easy to write jokes for this, that then just, we don't have time for this, let's cut it, because it was so much fun. I thought.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, I wish it was like even more comedy centric. Like the fact that the mysteries couldn't, in and of themselves be funny or just be, waved away with a joke. The fact that they had to have so much like fidelity to the mystery, to me, in some ways, seems sort of unnecessary. Like, John was good at the mysteries, obviously, but I think he clearly cared about the character comedy so much more. And so being able to focus on that would have been great. And I think that, mystery, like when you watch a mystery, basically mysteries work for 2 reasons that come to my mind right now, which is, one, you think that there's a possibility the detective won't solve the mystery. So there's, stakes there of will they or won't they solve this mystery. And then 2, the mystery is, catches you off guard, or it's complex enough that you're impressed by it and you can almost figure it out yourself, but you can't. And I think that neither of those things were necessarily intrinsic with the Scooby-Doo mysteries. Like, that the gang is going to solve the mystery because they always do. And a lot of times, like, the clues, you don't really have enough details to understand the significance of a clue, especially because a lot of times it's a made-up monster, so you don't quite know all the rules. So it's like in our episode, the crystal crawler leaves a handprint. This is a fictional monster. For all you know, it always leaves handprints. Is that significant? Is that not significant? I have no idea. so as an actual viewer, and so like you really don't have a good chance of solving it yourself. And then because we have to fit so much into a 22 in addition to all the character content, it's really not going to be complex enough to impress you. So if you don't believe, if you don't have a question about whether they're going to solve it, if you don't believe you can solve it yourself, and if you aren't impressed by it, there's not, to me, a ton of reason to do it. So, I wish that we had been able to just have sillier mysteries and just focused on the comedy.
I think what you're saying is there's like two ways to do Scooby, which is to have real mysteries and then to have it be funny. But at that point, you kind of got to sacrifice the mysteries a little bit to leave some room for the humor, and that becomes the forefront of the driving force, is like just a comedy show. And it sort of rode the line in between there, which, kudos to this show for what it did. But like, we enjoyed both aspects, and it would probably be easier and maybe more enjoyed more purely if it was one or the other. And I think we've seen tons of mystery episodes of Scooby, and Be Cool Scooby-Doo did a really great job of also incorporating comedy. And I guess what Justin and I are saying is, hey, why not do one that's a little more comedy, that's even more comedy and less mystery? Now, saying that as it's coming out of my mouth, there's a lot of Scooby-Doo fans who are like, this guy needs to die. but which I understand. I'm just saying, look, there's 40 some different versions of Scooby. I think it might be time, for just the irreverent Scooby, where the mystery is like, we admit it's either unsolvable until the end and they solve it, or and we're just having fun and seeing these characters just go nuts. I don't know, be fun to me.
I also, though, like thinking about a straight mystery Scooby would still be hard to do, because like there are so many types of mystery you can't do. Like a detective like Columbo or something can solve a mystery in which someone goes missing. A monster needs to be behind all of these mysteries. So what's the mystery? Is it a monster has gone missing? Or I guess it would be someone's disappeared, and also consequently at the same time a monster has shown up. But it always has to have this monster, and so that just kind of limits the sort of mysteries that you can get into. The concept is flawed, I'm saying. All Scooby-Doo is built on a foundation of sand, and the fact it's held up for this long is a miracle of modern science. I don't believe that. It's fine.
And what is it like to try and, squish a somewhat solvable mystery into 22 minutes?
Really hard. It's incredibly hard. I was talking to Marley about it recently, because Justin and I are working on another mystery show for an adult animated show. And I was like just talking about how we haven't written like a mystery since Scooby-Doo, which we wrote these episodes 7 years ago or something. And
I think it was more recent than that.
Was it? I don't know. Whatever. It feels like a while ago. We've written a lot since then, between then and rarely a mystery, though sometimes the aspects of writing a mystery, we use the sort of tools in that toolbox to tell other stories, sort of pull people's along for the ride using intrigue and other things. But trying to fit all the clues in there would be one thing, but also fitting in the Scooby tropes of the romp and the haircut scene, which I'm sure John probably talked a little bit about those things, where the haircuts when Shaggy and Scooby fake out the monster using almost Looney Tune level absurdity, and then the romp is the chase scene with the music. And then there's other little things along the way. But then in an animated show, trying to incorporate clues that you can notice are clues and also don't immediately give it away. Because in a live action show, there's any number of things that someone will hold while they're talking and be like, this is odd, or whatever. And then later on, you'll be like, of course, he noticed it when he was holding that thing. And in an animated show, if anyone holds anything, it's such a deliberate thing. It's not like an actor just offhandedly doing it. It's such a deliberate thing that they have to zoom in, especially for kids, to make sure that you're like, it so easily becomes completely predictable that but as we're writing it, we don't want it to be that way. So we do our best to make sure that it's not, which then makes it more challenging. And whether we did or not is another thing, whether we accomplish that goal. But yeah, it was incredibly difficult to fit a mystery. And essentially, it's not even 22. It's really like 15, because with the romp and getting there, the
cold open,
the romp, the cold open, and the haircut really are like 5 minutes of a 22. So it's like you have 17 minutes to like introduce some suspects and then figure out which one of them is a monster. And it's not just like find a killer. It's you also have to introduce the mythology, the fake mythology of a monster. And then that everyone knows is fake, and and it's going to be somebody in a costume.
Yeah, that's right. You just have to spend a lot of time faking people out, and no one is at all like fooled by it. You have to spend at least a couple of minutes explaining this fake monster, which you'll then undo, 18 pages later, which is, you're like, I wish I could have spent that page real estate on something else.
Yeah. You could easily write a Scooby-Doo episode where 3 times in one season characters are the same monster. Like different people play the same monster, right? Like there's nothing that says you couldn't do that. Even different locations, whatever. But like the monster it could be the same every time. It doesn't really matter. Other than that, it's cool to see a cool monster. Like it's fun to watch a new design, right? I think. But from a structural storytelling perspective, the monster is interchangeable every time.
Yeah, I mean, I think in our first draft, we were like a lot more at pains. We're like, all right, we're going to make this a really satisfying mystery. And like we had a lot more clues, and we even like threw in a red herring and a couple other things. And consequently, it was way too long. And in the next draft, we're like, all right, simpler mystery. This happens, this happens, this happens. That was the right choice.
And to dive into it a little bit more, did you have like a specific process or a way of looking at it when you were like starting to write?
Well, the mystery is like, it's so easy to come up with the jokes that like the mystery felt like the thing you'd have to like work on first almost.
Yeah, that's the first step for sure.
But it's such a weird thing because you'd come up with the beats of a mystery, but without the other details of, where they are going into an episode. So we knew it was going to be a cave with crystals and that you couldn't talk. And then it would be like, all right, what's the mystery within there? And so we'd come up with the beats and then a possible villain, but then you also kind of have to know what the clues are. Then you have to go, once you have a rough sketch of the beats of the mystery, you have to go and figure out the clues, but without that lead to that, but without the details of the rest of the episode, it's hard to tell what your clue is going to be. Because you could say, oh, they find a handprint because he's got chalk on his hand for climbing the walls. But you don't really know where that fits in or how, or if the other characters are going to have like chalk on their hands for some reason too, like this is just purely hypothetical, but you could write a clue where someone has chalk on their hands, and then while you're writing the episode be like, they would all have chalk on their hands, and then you're like, that wasn't the case in this episode, but like that kind of stuff did happen where it was like, we can't use this as a clue at all because it would never be weird. It would be a thing that would be totally normal. So like, but the mystery was always the skeleton that we would start with. And it was hard. but once we figured out a rough version, and clues did change, which was the hardest part, was like we would find out, hey, this clue doesn't really work. Why would this character do this thing? And then we'd have to, while the sort of like fix the plane while we're flying it, and that was like always a difficult task. But writing the comedy and everything was always so fun that it was just kind of like, all right, you focus on the mystery. Yeah, that's what you have to do. Again, I don't want to pretend like we wrote a perfect mystery or anything, but that was what we were attempting and trying and thinking about for most of that. Was our grounding center for the writing process.
Like Josie mentioned in her episode, and I also recommend people listen to her episode. They shouldn't just listen to Marley's. In fact, you know what? Don't listen to Marley's. Listen to Josie's. She mentioned that the executives were strangely particular about the mysteries. Like they would have a lot of notes about clues and such that would kind of throw a curveball to you midway through, and it would have a lot of ripple effects when you change things. So to me, it was just one more reason why either commit to having a full-on mystery show or have a full-on comedy show.
And to jump onto that a little bit, I think because the way it works is we would write the outline first, get that approved, and then we'd write the script. And in a 3-page outline, when you write a mystery and you include each of those clues, it is so predictable who did it, what these clues are building to, that you could read a 3-page description of a 22-minute episode with 3 different clues building to a mystery and 2 suspects and be like, I know who did this after the second clue. It's so obvious, but it's meant to be that way because it's an outline. It's supposed to be like, we're walking you through this. Whereas when you write the script, you can kind of hide it with jokes and move things around and make it slightly less obvious. But the execs are just reading an outline where it's so obvious, and they're like, this is so clear what you're doing. Change this clue or whatever. And you're like, yeah, I know, but it has to be clear because we're going to build a whole episode around it. If it's confusing in the outline stage, it'll be really confusing when the script's done. So that was always like a step that felt like a challenge. Was we needed to be clear enough in the outline that it's clear what's happening and motivations are all set up the way you're supposed to in an outline, but also fun and interesting enough that the execs aren't upset that it's so obvious, which was a weird tightrope to walk.
Yeah, that's always like the fact that executives or other people read multiple stages of a script is always a strange, tightrope that you have to walk. We have to try to keep it interesting for them at every stage, because, and especially like with comedy and with jokes, that sometimes if they see a joke was in the outline, now they are seeing it again in the third draft, they're like, oh, you know what? This isn't funny to me. And it's just because, well, no, it's just because you've seen it so many times.
The joke's a little predictable.
It's lost the novelty, but they'll be like, oh, just change it. And you're like, oh man, it's so trying to figure out how to deal with that, especially it's a strange part of comedy that I gotta imagine that in drama isn't, the same kind of thing. I gotta imagine you have exec notes being like, she's crying in this scene because her boyfriend was murdered. I mean, I guess she would do that, but like, what's more interesting here? I have to hope that doesn't actually happen in these conversations.
Yeah.
And not just necessarily for Scooby, but when you're working on a script together, do you have specific tasks or do you work it through together? How does that dynamic work?
We've done it all. Honestly, we've written together long enough that we've tried a bunch of different versions of stuff. Justin, what do you think works the best?
Well, we definitely need to outline it together for sure, so that we're both on the same page. And the more clear the outline is, the better. And then from that point on, we have an option of dividing it, and whether it's that we divide it and write it separately, and then send it to each other and we rewrite it separately, or we do a first draft separately and then rewrite it together, or sometimes, just do a first draft together. Like if we have the time,
Unlimited time. Yeah.
and it doesn't usually happen, that if we can actually write a first draft together where we're both trading off of the keyboard and we're kind of talking through everything, that ends up with, in some ways they're just better because every joke is pretty tight at that point. But you get to the same point. Like I'm pretty confident that scripts that we wrote both in the same room versus scripts that we wrote completely separately, by the time it gets to the end stage, I like to think that they both have a comparable level of quality. That said, the pandemic and now the fact that we are in 2 different countries, we're working on a feature right now, and it's the first time we've written a feature in quite a long time. And the fact that we are completely separate has been hard. We definitely have kind of had to like re-break it several times during the course of writing it.
And to elaborate on that a little bit, when you're writing together, you can have a system and you can sort of like cheat on the system a little bit. You like the writing system of who writes this and what time and stuff, because you're close proximity and you can discuss things easily. But when you're in different time zones and you never see each other in person, and you're working on a feature film, you really got to stick to that system. You really got to go, okay, treatment, outline, detailed outline, first draft, second draft. And we skipped one of those steps and we paid the price. We were, major problems started popping up because we couldn't just communicate. We'd have to schedule calls, which was, instead of being in the same office, can't do that because of the pandemic. We'd have to schedule calls, and then also the window's shorter because it's only 1 hour, but the time zone is different. And Justin has a child that has to be watched over and taken care of. And I start drinking at 4:30 every day. Just kidding. It's 5:30.
I mean, no, there's not to quickly move away from Steve's alcoholism, but there's a truism in writing like that. It takes the time it takes, and there's no shortcuts. If you don't spend the time outlining, you're going to spend the time rewriting, and it'll ultimately, take the same amount of time. So you might as well spend the time outlining because
it's easier.
Otherwise, the rewrite will just take twice as long.
Yeah, and it's easier to figure out problems in an outline than it is when you're in the middle of it. And you're like, when you're noticing the problems while you're in the middle of it, it feels so daunting. When you're noticing the problems in the outline, you're like, all right, we got to fix these before we start. And if you can somehow not notice the problems until you're completely done with the first draft, that's nice too. But most of the time, by the time you're finishing the first draft, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many problems. How are we even going to fix these? And you start like spiraling, and it's hard to even finish the first draft. And that's where we got to a point with our recent project that we were just like, all right, well, let's fix some of these problems and then finish, and then we'll fix the rest of the problems, which is not the way we would want to do, but it had to be done.
Yeah, the nice thing I think about being at the point we are in our writing partnership is that I can trust the process. I think if we were doing this project years ago and we're as in the weeds as we have been on this project, I definitely would have had some moments of panic being like, this project is hopeless. And also, I think I might be bad at this. And now this time along, I'm like, we'll figure it out. Like, I know we'll get through it. We'll figure it out. And that's at least a cold comfort, when you're in the middle of it.
I think we're bad at it regularly, or not we. I think Justin's great, and he always surprises me with funny stuff. I think I'm pretty bad at stuff on a regular basis, but then I'll write one line and be like, oh, I'm a genius. And then I'll write an episode, and it'll get leaked online, and everyone will be like, oh man, this is the worst episode of television ever. And I'll be like, oh. And then I'll write one line of some other project and be like, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm a genius. And it's just like a purely back and forth bipolar fun time, you know?
Yeah, that's true of a lot of writers, that you kind of have to be in some ways an egomaniac who doubts themselves at every stage. But the nice thing about partnership is that you can have confidence in the other person. Because yes, I definitely sometimes I'm like, I'm terrible at this, but at least Steve is good, so we got that going for us. I'll add also one tiny aside, and I don't know how you'll cut this in any sort of way, but since we talked about it before you started recording, I'm in another country right now. I'm in Canada because my wife is producing a TV show that's shooting up here, and that's why we are in separate countries and time zones. I realized as we talked about me being in time zone, the listener would have no idea what's going on and maybe think that I fled the country, but no, I didn't. I love the USA, but Canada's cool too.
Methinks you do protest too much. I think you did flee the country, and this is an elaborate cover story.
I'll never tell.
And after working together for so long, do you have any like weird or interesting quirks to your process that's like particular to when you are both working together?
When we lived in the same apartment and wrote together, like we amassed a strange amount of props that we would play with while we were writing. The weirdest of which was like a pair of crutches, and so like when one of us would be writing, the other one would be like crutching around the apartment, talking through the script or whatever, but just like, we would just kind of trade off on, yes, who is on crutches right now.
That's so bizarre. I've totally forgot about that. And just the idea of someone being like, oh yeah, it's my crutch. The other writer on this team is my crutch. Is such a funny, weird thing.
Yeah, we have like, it's smaller like things to play with when you're thinking about things like, when I go into a room, I'll like bring, like a stress ball or a fidget spinner or like, a worry stone or something, just something to have, I can fidget with while we are writing. I think it'd be pretty strange if I brought a pair of crutches into a new room, but I think it would help. I think everyone would be better off if I brought a pair of crutches with me, because they're kind of fun to play with.
They are fun. They're honestly a really good sort of tactile thing to mess with while you're thinking. It's just sort of crutching around a room and like a ball, but with your whole body. The only other quirk is when we write at my house, we have to fend. My cats just try and climb on both of us at all times. So it's pretty much just trading off who's gonna let the cats climb on them and who's not. But yeah, that's pretty much it, I think.
And as a complete aside, how many cats do you have and what are their names?
Oh, I have two, and in the video you can see that he's just hanging out next to me this entire time. That's Roscoe, and somewhere else is Rex. They're brothers. We found them in our friend's backyard. So they're when they were kittens, which is how we know they're brothers. Rex and Roscoe.
And back to Scooby-Doo here. Do you have a favorite member of the gang in general or a favorite member of the gang to write for?
Well, I mean, definitely on Be Quiet Scooby-Doo, Velma was the most fun. Like, I kind of think that now I'm having some flashbacks to the room, and I think that like maybe the only reason we selected volunteered for this episode was because Velma turns into a monster, and I don't know if that was a good trade-off for writing one that was completely silent, because that was a headache, but that part was really fun, and definitely that's one of the parts I'm like, I can't wait to see what the artist is going to do on this, and they absolutely went above and beyond on that.
I will probably agree, though I can't pick. It's hard for me to pick one. Velma is great because she has such a great dry, logical humor that that's different than anybody else in most animated shows. You see you see characters like her in like Big Bang Theory and stuff, but like she is so analytical and like will correct people in a way that you're like, oh, you know what she's gonna say and you know how it will be funny. In the same way you get with Shaggy and Scooby, but everyone knows how to like people see that coming, whereas Velma maybe not. Like the jokes, I mean. But I also do really like Shaggy because he's so cowardly, but also so hungry. That it's like these two conflicting character points of view that are legitimately funny. That it's just like he's terrified, but there's food over there. And then Scooby is kind of almost an extension of Shaggy because he's there to just, to some extent, comedy wise, he's his foil and he's there to deliver funny punchlines and responses to Shaggy. So they're kind of a pair, but I would say Velma is, you get to do the most like new, interesting stuff with her character.
Yeah, I also think that like Fred was fun as well because like especially in our episode in Be Quiet, you know, John's originally talking about comparing him to Basil Fawlty. That definitely comes across in ours where he's getting exasperated by the rest of the gang. Like that's a fun dynamic. I think in later episodes, I think they toned that back a little bit because I think if you watch all these episodes where he's constantly furious at them, you kind of wonder why he's hanging out with them and you want them to get along. But from just a comedy standpoint, it's fun to write someone who's like, I just want to do this one thing. All of you are frustrating that, and it's becoming worse, and I'm, you know, getting more and more angry. That's just a really fun dynamic to write.
And I will say, Daphne, while I think a lot of times turns out very fun, her games that she has each episode, where Be Cool, where she has something to do,
The Daphne du jour.
That can go either way. That can be a really fun thing that you're playing with in the episode. That you're like, oh man, there's so much fun stuff to do with Daphne. And then other times, because a lot of times those were things that that John had already come up with and was like, pick one for this episode, something for Daphne to do. And so sometimes you'd pick the wrong one and you'd pick one that you're like, oh no, this is hard. And I think in Be Quiet, perfect Daphne storyline. Like I loved her storyline in Be Quiet, that she thinks the crystals can give her the ability to read minds. That's, to me, perfect. In my other one, Don't Scooby-Doo the Crime, she's doing she's trying to become an impressionist. Terrible, bad call. I definitely like on a monthly basis, I'll like kick myself and be like, why wasn't, it's a prison themed episode, why wasn't she trying to break out of handcuffs or a straitjacket? It would have been such a better game for the whole episode if Daphne is just trying to become an escape artist for an episode about escaping prison. That I'm like, why impressionist? It's so pointlessly like, there's no thematic connection. It was difficult to write.
Also, you have no idea if the voice actor can do impressions. Like, it's
exactly.
Really putting the cart before the horse there.
Yeah, so it was just like she can go either way. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's hard. But Velma is so consistent. I love it.
Definitely.
Shaggy is the easiest character to write for because you can get into his voice so easily. It's so well defined.
Yeah, I remember that we would like when we were writing it, we would start every line of his by saying like, and then we would write the rest of the line, and then we would go back, you know, systematically and delete some of the likes so he didn't sound the exact same in every single line.
Yeah, so everyone didn't start with like or zoinks.
It's just the easiest way to get into his voice.
Yeah, but it works.
Yeah, similar with Scooby, we'd all start every line with like, yeah,
that's true.
And then we would delete the yeah, so he's not just agreeing with everything.
Yeah. Scooby's interesting too because you can really only effectively. It's very difficult to write his lines if they're longer than like 4 or 5 words, just because of the way he like I mean, he can talk longer than that, but it's hard to imagine what that would sound like in that voice.
Definitely. We talked quite a bit about the challenges of writing for Scooby-Doo, but were there any fun memories or stories from working on the show?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like it was really great, you know, getting to hang out and joke around with John and Steve and Marley and Josie. Like those little few chances that we got to do that was great, and we got great material out of it. And you know, I also emailed John last night to try to remember anything from our time, and he reminded me that they based a character design off of me for one of the episodes. In the episode Scream Madonna, Kyle, the hovering balladeer, is based off of me. Um, I like to think it's probably mostly because a lanky bald guy with a beard is easy to draw, but maybe there is a level of affection there as well, and so that's nice.
Yeah, they didn't base anyone off me. I'm still mad about it. No, I think I honestly, the challenges aside, I think the whole process is there's fun aspects of the whole process. Definitely being in the group setting and like bouncing ideas. I think we raved about that earlier, how there should be writers' rooms because it's like the creative process doesn't get better than that, especially when you're breaking new stories. Um, but getting a chance to write for characters that are so well defined is just fun. Like aside from the mystery is always going to be a challenge, but getting to write these characters is fun. And when you have a writing partner, you feel it because you're like coming up with jokes that you're like, this is funny. Oh man, we're having fun. I can't believe they're paying us to do this. Um, yeah, it's just a fun time writing for these specific characters' voices.
And is it at all daunting to step onto a show where the characters are so well known? There's been so many different iterations.
Yeah, it's a little daunting. I think, but I'd say the characters being well known is like you have to operate under the assumption because I haven't seen every Scooby episode. I think it would take me, I would have had to spend my whole life up to this point to be able to catch up to the number of Scooby stuff there is. I don't know. But I think you have to operate under the assumption that there's probably versions of stories that have been done before, but you are bringing something to the table and in our case it was probably more like, well, we're going to do a funnier version of Scooby than most of them. So and you just have to sort of just try and do your best and not think about that, especially when it comes to the mystery, because you're like, there's been hundreds and hundreds of episodes. Almost every mystery's been done, and if you come up with one or two that haven't, it's more the exception to the norm or the exception to the rule. So that can be daunting. So you just really can't think about it. Like that's more daunting. The comedy stuff, you're like, oh, we'll come up with jokes that they haven't done before. But the mystery and the monsters too, because it's like it's hard to come up with a monster that somebody isn't like, oh yeah, there's an evil snowman in this season. The crystal crawler, it's like there might not be a crystal crawler in any other seasons, but there's probably a monster that lives in a cave in another episode. It's almost a guarantee there's a dozen mummies, like so some of that stuff is like you can't think about it because that can be because if you start trying to be like it needs to be 100% different and something no one's ever seen before, it's an impossible task. So the best you could hope is like a new take on something people have seen before, but different enough that it's fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I could see how you could get daunted early on, like about thinking about the legacy or something about the characters. But I think once you actually get into writing, especially writing a mystery that has so many moving parts, it quickly becomes a little math problem, where X, Y, Z needs to happen. Velma needs to find this. Okay, well, within the parameters that we've set of Velma's personality, why would she do this? And then you're just thinking so, straightforward that it doesn't really enter into comparing it to other iterations or what its place is in the larger culture.
And why do you think that Scooby-Doo has held up for so long? It's going on over 50 years now.
Scooby. It's
That's it.
Scooby's. Yeah, no. I think a big part of it is Scooby is a cute, dumb dog, which I think like people are like, I don't want to sound like I'm insulting him. I think watching Scooby react in sort of like a goofy way is very fun, and then the rest of the characters are I do think the episodic nature of telling a mystery story is uh, works, and it's going to keep bringing people back for as long as they do it, despite Justin and I's personal feelings of how it would be fun if they didn't, or like it didn't matter. But like, there's a reason there's a million Law and Orders, because they're all telling mysteries, and there's a million Columbos and Castles and Murder She Wrote and stuff. So you have you have that, and then you have this really funny, goofy dog, cute dog character in the forefront that kids can love, and then a story engine of mysteries being solved by teens that is just like always going to provide something to be going on while Scooby is eating big sandwiches.
I think counterintuitively, one of the reasons that it works and has survived for so long was because the original was so underwritten. Because you have basically, when people think of the old one, they remember the way the characters look, and then they remember that there was a mystery, and they ran around and pulled the mask off a monster. And then when you like go back and watch it, that actually is all that was in there. It just takes so long to happen because those episodes are so much slower by modern standards. And so because there are only like those 5 touchstones, you can bring it back in all sorts of different ways as long as you have these characters, and as long as you have some element of a mystery, and as long as you have a monster, you can bring it back. And like John said in his episode, which I also recommend, that the original Fred and Daphne didn't have a ton of characterization. Like they didn't have a lot of personality. So like you could bring them back just by like the strength of their design, and only later like have they added it to personality. Like if you go have like IP that's like a superhero thing, like you're gonna reboot Spider-Man. There's so much more that people want to see. Like they want to see the origin story. They want to see their favorite villains. Like they want to see all of these other things happen, and they want to see it in the way that they're imagining. But Scooby-Doo doesn't have that. It is a lot more, in some ways, ill-defined. Like I don't know why they're driving around in that van solving mysteries. I'm sure that in some of the versions there's good backstory for that. I don't know what it was. I didn't need to know that to write it, let alone watch it. And so like I think it's a strange mix of extremely specific in some ways. Like all of their outfits are so of their time period, and Shaggy is a beatnik character like parody. So those things are so specific, and then it's so unspecific in so many other ways. They're driving around in a van in ostensibly America, I guess, and doing something for some reason. And because of that, you can do a lot with it. And I think that's why they keep bringing it back.
Definitely. I think that covers all of the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else that you want to add at all before we wrap up here?
As a Scooby super fan, do you know why they're driving around? Like, what is the inciting incident? What are they trying to do?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Right?
I think John had said that it's the summer it's the summer after senior year, and they're on a road trip. And that's why I think they go to a college. They visit a college in the first episode. But beyond that, I'm
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. And just before we wrap up, do you have any recent projects that you'd like to promote or older projects, whatever you've worked on?
Oh, I've already recommended some episodes of your show, so yeah, people should check those out. Um,
Well, we'll look up clips of Right Now Kapow online. You won't be disappointed.
oh yeah,
There's a few online.
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, that's the show that Marley and I created, and Steve and Josie wrote on, and there's we wrote like 450 sketches, not like a small portion of that. Those are available on YouTube, and besides buying the show on iTunes, it's not really available for streaming. But if anyone wants to check it out, I think that they'll like it, especially if they like Be Cool. Um, I guess sometime next year on the Paramount Network, Guilty Party will premiere. And even though I don't have anything to do with that, that's the show my wife is producing. And so I think that if you watch it, you'll kind of sense me somewhere in the background taking care of our child. That's that's my contribution to that show.
Yeah. It wouldn't exist without you doing that.
Thanks.
I would say also, if you want to look up something that embodies a lot of our comedic sensibilities, and it got a little bit of internet love years ago, is our Adult Swim infomercial Broom Shakalaka, which is about a Wonder Broom infomercial that and things go awry, but people like it, and we're really proud of it still. And yeah, we have other projects going on, but we can't really talk about any of them.
And also, they all take so long to they take so long to develop that by the time they come out, there'll be at least 2 or 3 more iterations of Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, it's true. And in 3 years, we'll be able to talk about them because they're out finally, or they never happened. But yeah, other than that, personal plug, I review Mountain Dew on Instagram at do's.and.don'ts. Do's and don'ts.
Do's as in DEWS.
Oh yeah, DEWS. Yeah, so you can go there, check out. I have about 100 reviews of Mountain Dews.
That is fantastic. Are there any other social media channels where people can find you?
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter also at WallaWords, WALLAWORDS. Walla is miscellaneous background noise in TV. If you are having trouble understanding what that means, it's because no one listens to me. I'm just background noise on Twitter.
Justin, any social media?
Yeah, I'm looking it up. I'm not quite sure what my name is.
Yeah, Justin is on Instagram. He does some. He is a not a professional artist, but he does some fun little art stuff on Instagram. That's really great, and you should check that out.
I guess.
Oh, awesome!
It's yeah. Is your name? Is this my profile? I haven't posted anything in 3 years, but I'm planning on starting again. I think it's Justin BEEC, I believe is the name. Yeah,
I think that's it. I could look it up if you want.
I'm trying to look it up right now, but I don't actually know what I'm looking at. Is your username the same as your @ name? Gosh, I am not.
He's really good.
I promise I'm not this old. The internet is not beyond me.
Yeah, it's Justin BEEC, man.
I had a child, and I stopped having time for anything else, and I've apparently forgotten everything.
Yeah, that's what happens.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today for 2 whole hours.
Oh boy, wow.
It was very fun. Sorry we took that long.
No, I love it. And that concludes today's episode. Another huge thank you to Justin Becker and Steve Clemmons for taking the time to chat with me. I'm so happy that I can finally share it with everyone. For more Burm-related content, be sure to check out Unmasked SD on Twitter, at Unmasked SD Podcast on Instagram, or at unmaskedsdpodcast.com. You can also find the podcast on Facebook under the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo podcast. And of course, you can find Steve reviewing Mountain Dew over on @do's and don'ts on Instagram or on Twitter @WallowWords. And you can find Justin @JustinBeec on Instagram. If you like this episode and want to hear more, also make sure to check those social media channels or the website. Or you can listen to older episodes wherever you like to get your podcast fix. Thanks for listening, and keep an ear out for the next episode. Scooby-Dooby-Doo!